Hello, America. Welcome to the Junto Podcast, where we promote the practical applications of critical thinking and bold creativity. As always, I'm your host, Edgar Mills. Hey, America. Welcome to episode 8 of the Junto Podcast. So, as always, thanks for listening. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. So, what are we going to talk about today? Today, we're going to talk mostly about Osprey Shooting Solutions training methods, the way I go about training humans to shoot guns. We're specifically about guns. We're going to talk about some leadership and teamwork stuff a little bit, but mainly about shooting guns. So if that's what you're into, stick around. So my gun shooting life started well before I joined the Army, but much like most people, there was no formal training at all. It was just what I'd learned from my granddad, what I'd seen on television, and that just ain't enough. So when I went to the Army, even as an infantryman, rarely did we get to shoot pistols. It was all rifle in the infantry or machine guns or whatnot. And fundamentals apply to both rifle and pistol, obviously, but being a good pistol shooter is a whole nother level of training. You could be a good rifle shooter and not be a very good pistol shooter. Whereas if you're a very good pistol shooter, chances are you're a very good rifle shooter as well. There's just more variables. It's smaller. It's easier to manipulate and to move when you're shooting and while you're shooting, which makes it a little bit, I don't want to say harder to control, but every little variable matters there. So I really learned how to shoot a pistol when I joined the Special Forces. And my team sergeant, his name was Ken, was an excellent shooter, like a rock, man. He was awesome, and he did not miss. And he did a good job of explaining and training me how to shoot a gun. I got very good at shooting a pistol for SF standards. I got very good at shooting. But there is a methodology in the big institutions and SF and law enforcement and in any big institution. There is a kind of old paradigm, old school methodology that doesn't really break down the nuance as far as it could or should. And why is that? Well, probably because you got a lot of people. You're trying to train a lot of people in a short period of time. And when I say a lot, when it comes to SF, I mean, you might have a whole company doing advanced urban combat at one time. That's anywhere from 80 to 100 shooters online doing things. Now, obviously, smart people break that up into smaller bites, but the point is you're kind of, especially in the conventional Army, training to the lowest common denominator. And what that makes for is very generic instruction. And then, if you're not picking up the very basics, then they'll send you off on the far side of the line, to do some remedial stuff. And then somebody will try to figure out what you're doing wrong. So no matter how sexy everybody is, all the Cephalic and Sephardic and all this and that, range 37 dudes, anybody who is very good at shooting, they go outside of the institutional and organizational venues. That being said, Sephardic produces some incredibly good shooters. However, that doesn't mean they're the best. And not only that, even the top shooter at Sephardic still, chances are a top shooter at Sephardic probably shoots on his own as well, probably does competition shooting. But let's talk a little bit about police agencies. I've trained with many SWAT teams and not full-time SWAT teams. Let me caveat what I'm about to say is all of the SWAT teams I've ever trained with have been part-time or residual duty SWAT teams. Up to 40, 50 guys, yeah, true, but they are patrolmen and K9 guys and whatever, detectives. So their training time is limited, and I'm going to argue that's kind of like just by poor planning on the behalf of the leadership mostly, but we can get into that another day. Their training is I hate to say worse, but worse when it comes to training to the lowest common. They get the majority of their firearms training in the police academy, and then after that, it's minimal hours per month. I'm not saying days per month, guys. I'm saying minimal hours per month. And that's most of these little smaller agencies out there. So the cops that are out there on the street right now who do shoot well, 100% is because they go and shoot matches on the weekends, or they go seek out their own training from some of these YouTube sensations or whoever else, the tactical guys. And I'm not bemoaning those guys. Some of them are good, and some of them are not. What I'm saying is they seek out additional training on their own. A lot of guys are hesitant to do that. Bullets cost money, yes, but where are your priorities? If I was a law enforcement guy, if I carried a gun every day for a living, I would train additional time into the lethal force that I have on my hip, for sure, 100%. The same as within in the military. I know it was different in the early 2000s for me, and my experience as it is like today. These days, I know a lot of SF dudes, young SF dudes, older SF dudes, who go out and chase down matches on the weekends, USPSA, PCS League, or whatever. Whereas you didn't see that in the early 2000s, and certainly not in the 90s. When I was an infantryman, I didn't know anyone that shot competition, and that was in the 82nd. And you would think, yeah, there's something like 60,000 dudes or something. Somebody's got to shoot. I just didn't know those guys. And you would have thought that I would have. You would have thought they would have been prominent, but they weren't. So it's a good dynamic that young soldiers and cops are going out these days and shooting. And I completely attribute that to social media and YouTube. Now everybody is on social media, and everybody is a little superstar. So when you see some guy out there burning it down, and you wonder, hey man, can I do that better than him? Sometimes guys are just so hyper competitive that once they see someone doing a thing, they got to do it better. And that's a good thing. So yeah, the dynamic I think has changed over time. So the institutional training has been very slow to change, though. Has been very slow to change. And that comes, is it an unwillingness to change? Is it because the bureaucracy is so thick that to change any training doctrine is just beyond the pale? I don't know. I don't know why that is. But I know that the war, over 20 years of combat, I know for sure that created different dynamics, and people were shooting for real in a real situation, and they were learning that the bullseye style shooting just was not it. All right, completely broke my train of thought there. What we're talking about here is training. We're talking about institutional training, specifically military and law enforcement, and the shortfalls of that. And we're talking about the need, based on priorities, the need to get out and train on your own at shooting matches, taking courses with credible people and things like that. So let's get into it. Who's the credible people? There's a lot of guys, flashy guys out there on YouTube. I'm certainly not one of those flashy guys. And I don't necessarily say flashy to be derogative. However, my catchphrase is no frills. I don't F around with a bunch of flashy things. So, but there are a lot of credible guys. Now, some of those guys who have some credible pedigree or some credible background, or they were a Navy SEAL for about 4 years and then got out and became social media influencers and started training people how to shoot guns. What I do see is a lot of weird little techniques that aren't the optimal techniques. I see a lot of weird little nuances and idiosyncrasies from these dudes that look sexy as hell, but when it comes down to really being the most efficient, they're not. And I see that a lot from some big name dudes. So the good thing about these big name dudes, from my perspective, is that most of them charge so much for a class that your average guy's not going to take their class. So, they're looking for the big money, and that's great. And they're going to get people who want to pay big money just to stand around with a nice looking Navy SEAL. So methodology out at OSS, right? The way I train is very much a jump in the deep end approach. And the tactics and techniques, well, not tactics, the techniques that I use for shooting are not ever changing, mind you. Principles versus techniques. Principles are never changing, are etched in stone and blood, and they are rules that must be followed, whereas techniques are methods of implementing those principles, and they may change, and they do change. And I use the catchphrase all the time, techniques are like a-holes. Everybody got one. Most of them stink. So, yep, there's your old school dad joke for the day. So techniques come and go. And some of these flashy YouTube guys, that's their flash. That's their catch, is their little silly technique or their little product that is just ridiculous, but they explain it in such an awesome way that you have to have it. So my techniques may change. Yeah, so my techniques may change, but the principles never will. And what would prompt my techniques to change? Well, if someone shows me a more efficient, faster way to do a thing, I'm completely open to it. Now, earlier in my career never mind my career as a soldier. Yeah, as a Green Beret, my job was to train people, and I trained lots of people from Algeria to Ukraine to wherever, how to shoot guns and do tactics. But my instructional skill evolved because you approach it a little differently when you're training third world guys who, I don't want to get into politics, but who may eventually become your enemy or whatever. And there's also guidelines from DOD on what you can and can't give up as far as TTPs go. At any rate, when you start training more and more soft guys, American soft guys, your own soldiers, then your techniques really have to, your training technique, your instructional methods really have to get tuned up. Because one, in this business, in the soft business, there's a lot of judgmental dudes out there, and they will sharpshoot you to death. So you have to be correct. You have to come correct when you're delivering the goods. So that's one, is tuning up instructional technique. And then you're tempted to train. So this is my early years. I trained 2 skill levels. And that's not to say you can go out with a USPSA Grandmaster and a new shooter and do the exact same things on the range, but almost you can, because it's about how they perform the task, not necessarily the act of performing the task itself, right? Not necessarily the outcome. Obviously, a Grandmaster is going to move faster and get better hits than a new shooter. But they, in theory, should execute the task the exact same way. A newer shooter might just be doing it slower. I don't know. So I used to have a catchphrase, and I wrote a blog yesterday and put it out. I used to have a catchphrase way back when I was the SOCOM marksmanship team or marksmanship program in CLSC. And that catchphrase was, pull the trigger cartoonishly slow. And even at that time, I didn't understand the implications of that. Now I do. The implications of pulling the trigger cartoonishly slow is that you will learn to pull the trigger cartoonishly slow, and you will learn that very well. But when it's time to pull the trigger fast, you're not going to get the same result. The reason I thought pulling the trigger cartoonishly slow is the correct answer was, one, because that's how I learned. And that's what I think, I don't know, Pat McNamara or somebody called that institutional inbreeding. So I learned sort of somewhat inferior technique, and then I perpetuated that. The idea is if you pull the trigger incredibly slow, then you'll be able to see what's going on with your front sight, or you'll be able to tell whether or not you're manipulating your gun left, right, up or down or whatever when you squeeze the trigger. And that's all fine and well. But when the beep goes off, now we're talking about something completely different. So over time, so my challenge when I first started shooting competitions with my mentor Dan and my son Zeke, we were down in Tampa, Florida, and my challenge was speed. I could put rounds on target with no problem whatsoever. A zones were the goal. That's what I thought was the most important thing, is putting two really close shots close together in the middle of the A zone. And my challenge was speed. I would go and shoot a match and I would maybe get 5th place or 6th place or something like that. And never number 1, number 2, number 3, because my time was just slow. Even if I ran a clean stage, I was still slower than a guy who picked up a couple of Charlies or whatever. So, and even then, because I was still in the military and I knew I was going back to my unit and I knew that I was going to deploy another 2 or 3 times, I was hesitant to accept the looser hits and trade off for speed. I was hesitant to trade accuracy for speed. Well, after, going back to my unit, multiple deployments, and then shooting matches in Colorado Springs with my son, again, I was still hesitant to really open up the speed and accept a little bit looser hits. And then that kept me marginal. That kept me lower on the ranking there. So eventually a retirement came and went, and now I began to open up. And I learned how to pick out different metrics to work for a different thing. Every shooting drill or every shooting session didn't have to have 2 alphas, 2 alphas, 2 alphas, 2 alphas. I could really speed up and accept a Charlie, or maybe even 2 Charlies sometime, depending on what I was doing and how fast I was trying to go. So I was looking at different metrics now, not just where the bullets hit, but how fast did they hit, how controlled was I, and how out of control was I. How much of the sight or the dot did I see, did I need to see, and how still or how shaky was it? So when you start to look at different metrics, and you can start to push different little smaller pieces of the overall sequence there. And I learned how to push speed, and I learned how to accept a C zone here and there. And then you just not accept the C zone, but you decipher, where did it go wrong? How did I hit that C zone? Did it have to do with overswinging my arms on a target transition, or were my wrists and my hands just loose and the gun was moving? Did I manipulate the gun when I squeezed the trigger? There's a lot of things you can look at. And so instead of going slow enough to hold on to the A zones, you go fast enough to kind of go off the rails a little bit and figure out, okay, what was it that caused me to go off the rails? That's a far more analytical way to train, and it's a far more beneficial way to train. And I think ultimately, here's what happens. And I do this with newer shooters, inexperienced shooters, or whatever. I have them shooting fast early. I think that's very important. And I use the analogy, and this mostly applies to guys probably, but when you were 16 and you got your driver's license and your very first opportunity to go drive by yourself, for the probably first 2 miles, you were obeying the speed limit and making sure everything was safe. But then you got off into a parking lot or you got off onto a dirt road somewhere. And then what did you do? Yeah, man, you cut loose. All right. I had a 1972 Ford LTD out drifting in the backwoods of suburban Atlanta. So, yeah, then you go and tear it up, right? You go and go wide open. See, because we all think we're race car drivers until we get sideways in the middle of the road and then off onto the ditch or whatnot. We learn where the limits are. And guess what? Even a 72 LTD, that car could outpace my ability. Just like your gun can outpace your ability. Chances are you're not going to shoot the gun faster than it can cycle. It's just, I don't know that I've ever seen that happen with a modern, handgun. So why not get a gun, your pistol in a controlled environment, controlled and safe environment, and push it and try to push it out, see where your limits are at. What this does for you as far as grip and recoil management goes is that it gets you very uncomfortable very quick, and it causes you to focus on what you need to do to feel comfortable, or to feel more in control. And I encourage people to shoot fast enough. Well, I tell people to shoot as fast as they can pull the trigger. If the gun feels like it's out of control, hang on to the gun, keep it pointing on target, but keep riding it. And what that will do is intimately show you where your grip is weak. And you should do that. There's no reason not to do that. The problem with most indoor ranges is that you can't draw from the holster and you can't shoot rapid fire and things like that. But out on most outdoor ranges, you can, and you should. So, and then the next thing I go into is the draw. Now, you may say, why are you starting with recoil management before you start with the draw? I think chronologically, yes. There are the three things I think are most important when it comes to shooting a pistol. In chronological order are, you have to be able to draw your gun efficiently. 2, you have to be able to hit what you're shooting at. And that sounds oversimplified, but I'll explain in a sec. And then 3, you have to be able to shoot fast. And I'll explain that in a second. So you have to be able to get your gun. If you're a concealed carrier and you're carrying in some obscure position, you have to train to get that gun out fast. The gold standard is 1 second, just as far as time goes. But that's not always the answer. It's not the only answer, and it's not always 1 second might be too slow. So you need to dry fire that and train and learn to get your daily carry pistol out as fast as you can. Now, if you're shooting a belt rig for a competition or whatnot, set that thing up where it's most conducive for you to lift that gun straight out of the holster and go to work. So, the gold standard's about 1 second. Train faster than that, and get that down as a subconscious task. Yeah. And then the next most important thing is being able to hit what you're shooting at. Now, you would think, okay, well, that's the most important. Okay, I kind of agree that it is, but you still have to get your gun out in order to do that. So what 2 things inform being able to hit what you're shooting at the most? Well, visual focus, what you're looking at, and then, grip. That's it, grip. If you have a solid grip, a consistent grip, and when you present your gun up into your line of sight, if you're looking at that target, you should be able to put rounds on target. Whether they're perfect A-zone rounds or semi-loose C-zone rounds at 30 yards, if you hold the gun the same every time, and you're looking at a fine point, excuse me, and you're looking at a fine point on the target, you're going to be able to hit the target. The grip and visual focus are the 2 things that inform accuracy the most. Not breath control, not trigger control, absolutely not stance. Grip and visual focus. Those two things will put rounds on target. And then I said third was you got to be able to shoot fast. And why do you think that is? Why not just one or two well placed controlled shots? Well, from a concealed carry or self-defense perspective, if you watch video after video after video, or if you've ever been in an actual gunfight, there is a adrenaline factor and a pucker factor, and people subconsciously tend to shoot fast. You see cops do it all the time. They'll dump entire magazines and then have to go into a reload. Now, I don't know if they train to do that or it's because they're scared out of their mind or because I don't know why they do it. But if you see civilians do it as well, there's some subconscious effort there telling them to shoot fast. The first time I ever shot at anyone who was shooting at me was with a rifle, and I shot fast. My eyes looked like tea saucers, and I was staring at muzzle flash, and I was running. My fire team was running, and we were returning fire at a high rate of speed, trying to get to cover. I didn't plan on shooting fast. The prevailing thought in my mind was get to cover. So there's a subconscious reaction that takes over when things like that happen. Now, as far as competition goes, why shoot fast? Well, most competitions require 2 rounds per target. And look, splits matter in a competition. However fast you can shoot those 2 rounds, or they might throw a curveball at you. And this has happened to me many times, even in my own match that I set up. Instead of having 2 rounds per target, you change it to 3 rounds per target and see how many dudes run the whole stage shooting 2 rounds per target. I've done that before because you're so ingrained to shoot 2, boom, 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 boom. So it's good to work outside of that habit. But the point is, you're not going to sit and take 2 slow aimed fire shots on every target. That'd slow you down. Now, what's considered to be good splits? It depends on distance and whatnot, but anywhere high speed pros are out there shooting, 1.5, 1.6 splits. And I'd say average folks are shooting somewhere between 1.8 and about 2.2 splits. How critical are the splits? I don't know, but I know tenths of seconds and hundredths of seconds add up eventually, depending on how long the stage is. So yeah, it's kind of important to be able to shoot fast, and grip is what allows you to do that. High hands, maximum meat on grip, and locked wrists. And then how much force? Well, however much force you need that stops the gun from moving inside of your hands. It doesn't have to be max Arnold Schwarzenegger clamp down to be able to control the gun. And in fact, kind of the more relaxed your shoulders and upper body are, the faster, the more agile you can be. Over tensing your body tends to slow you down a little bit. But your grip, yes, it should be fairly hard enough that the gun doesn't move when you pull the trigger. The only thing that should move when you pull the trigger is your trigger finger. And then, of course, it's going to recoil. There's no way to stop that, ladies and gentlemen. There's no way to stop it. So what you're looking for is that consistent grip so that the gun bounces right back to where it started. That's what we're looking for, is that the gun bounces right back to where you're looking. So if you're looking at the A zone, the top half of the A zone, or the A itself, or you got a little black pasty on target, and you start there, boom, 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 you should finish there, ideally. And that's recoil management. That's what it is. You're not going to stop it from recoiling, but you can certainly predict where and when it's going to land back on target. And that's what some of these modern dudes are calling predictive shooting versus reactive shooting, where you're reacting to what your sights are telling you. So for more difficult targets or longer targets or whatnot, yeah, you might get a little bit more of a sight picture while still maintaining target focus before you actually drop the hammer or squeeze the trigger. So the point of all of what I'm saying here is, and we go over a lot of these things in class or on the range, but learning to shoot fast early will help you get consistent faster, I believe. slow down and get your hits it's a trap. It's a slow guy trap. It's a feel good trap because anyone can go slow and get the hits. Anyone can go slow and get the hits. And if you go cartoonishly slow, absolutely you're going to get the hits and it's going to feel good. And you're going to be like, oh, look, I'm dead on the A. Awesome. It only matters if you can do it under time and stress. Really, it does. Everything beyond that is just bullseye shooting. Now, if you're in the bullseye shooting game, yeah, that's a whole different thing. Yeah. Aim, relax, breathe, relax, aim, squeeze, take your time, exhale, deep, long exhale at the bottom of your breath. Slowly squeeze the trigger until the wall breaks. All that stuff. And there's a time and place for that. Long range precision shooting there's a time and place. What we're talking about here, guys, is action shooting or performance shooting. Dynamic stuff where time and stress or problem solving on the move, that kind of thing. So shoot fast. Well, what if you don't have even the most basic knowledge of hand? Yeah, of course you have to understand the principles of the grip. You have to have the grip first. If you just pick up a gun and start blazing away with a teacup, whatever, or the Air Force, what I'll call the Air Force grip, where everybody's got their thumbs all tucked under, you're never going to be able to build anything on that foundation because it's not a repeatable, stable foundation. It's flawed. So of course the foundation has to be solid. And if I see problems with it, we work on it. But how do you test it though? You shoot fast. If I tune your grip up and then we shoot one slow aim fire and another slow aim fire, you're not really getting the full effect of did my change have any effect at all. So even then you test it by shooting it fast. So yeah, you have to have the foundation of the grip. The grip is the foundation that the house is built on. And once that grip is stable and repeatable, that's it. Go fast. Everything else is a little technique that can be tweaked. High hands, maximum grip coverage, locked wrists, and there you go. Let her rip. And tension, right? What kind of tension? Well, inward tension on the grips. Lateral, inward, left and right tension. Our right hand, or not our right hand, our firing hand provides the front strap and the back strap tension. We don't need any more. I've had a lot of people come out to my place and they want to ask about am I supposed to push with my firing hand and pull with my support hand and all that stuff. That stuff went out of style with friggin' Barney Miller and Hill Street Blues. That I think that stuff is from like the Weaver stance or something. Stuff that has long since been, I don't want to say debunked, but discovered as to be not the most efficient way to do business. So the isosceles stance with lateral pressure from your hands. And now, and where you lock your elbows, well, that's up to you. Some people have a very distinct bend in their elbows when they fire. Some people lock their arms straight out when they fire. I don't do that. And primarily because I learned how to shoot guns with wearing body armor all the time. And it's kind of difficult when you got a bunch of kit on, not just the plate itself, but like all the other stuff. It's difficult to get those arms completely locked. But when it comes to presentation and how far you should push your gun out, I refer to a fellow named Frank Proctor. He is a former SF guy and a grandmaster professional shooter, and that guy makes it look easy. He's I don't know how tall he is, but he's got long arms. And when that guy shoots, he's got a pretty distinct bend in his elbows. And he's smooth as butter. Smooth as butter. So, yeah, I like the way that looks. I don't think there's anything wrong with either way, locking out or keeping your elbows bent. At any rate, see which one helps you shoot faster and then do that one. All right, I'm going into instructional stuff. Here's what I'm saying, folks, is there's nothing wrong with shooting fast. The bare fundamental you need before you start shooting fast is the grip, but the way to test that grip is by shooting fast. So, and then the other thing is, the only thing you can't dry fire at home is recoil management. Anything else you can dry fire at home. You can draw, you can try your sub-second draw. You can do multiple target transitions. You can do lateral movement from array to a target array to target array. You can do sprints to and from. You can do mag changes. If you want to practice malfunctions, by all means, practice malfunctions. You can do all those things in your basement or in your living room. The only thing you can't do at home is shoot the gun fast and feel the recoil. And that is one of the reasons we impress upon it so much out here. It's one of the reasons we impress upon it so much out here, because it's the one thing you can't do on your own. And I'm not trying necessarily to work myself out of a job. By all means, come out here and train. But a good dry fire program will give you exponential improvement in a short period of time if you're holding yourself accountable. And that's the facts. You will see visible improvement from one range time live fire to another live fire if you dry fire in between. And don't try to learn everything under the sun all in one sitting. Pick a task, work on that task, and then get to a point where you can repeat that task comfortably. And there you go. And then move on to another task, or go back later to confirm that you can repeat that task. Dry fire is critical, and you don't need any fancy stuff. You can download a IPSC shot timer on your phone. If it's a timer with a par time, you can dry fire at home. You can set up almost anything as a target. I happen to like Ben Steger's Dry Fire Reloaded book, because you can get one package that comes with little IPSC targets and little steel poppers and whatnot that are down to scale. You can paste those up all over your house. You can use pictures of your mother-in-law, whatever. It does not matter. As long as you are focusing on the target, bring your gun up to your line of sight, and when you pull the trigger, the gun remains still and stable. So dry fire is critical, but you cannot dry fire recoil management. It's important. So I call that methodology, I kind of call it the deep end methodology, by throwing people in the deep end. But here's another thing that going fast early does. And I think it helps people get comfortable quicker. I've seen people come out absolutely nervous to have a loaded gun on their body. I mean, very new shooters or very nervous shooters. And then after, 40 minutes of doing various recoil management type stuff, it's completely gone. So shooting fast early helps you get more intimate with your gun quicker, to learn how it reacts at speed, how the gun reacts. And obviously, most of that is from your input, but it helps you to identify your input, either the shortcomings or whatnot, faster. So, overall, I think it's very important. So this is my idea behind going fast early. And I said this in my blog, and a few guys have said this, more famous guys have said this, but the old military trope, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. There's still Navy SEALs out there spitting that stuff. There's all kind of dudes saying that still. And the fact of the matter is, slow is slow and fast is fast. You can be smooth either way. You don't necessarily have to start out slow to get faster. You don't necessarily have to. You can start out fast and have an instructor to help you identify the flaws there. You can tune those up fast, and then you can have those faster sooner. Being smooth is important. Yes, I concur. But if you read the blog, you'll see that I kind of call the slow, smooth, and as fast thing It's kind of like a unintentional lie that supposes that you will eventually get fast. But I'm here to tell you, you don't have time for eventually. You need to learn to get fast early. You need to learn to get fast straight away. Now, in the armed, like say police business or military business, if you're a newer shooter, but you deploy, guess what? You've deployed. Every gunfight is not a quick draw until it is. And if it is, it is. You can either rise to the occasion or you won't. In the civilian world, you see a lot of cops up close and personal type engagements. Every gunfight is not a quick draw unless it is. So we can't hope that we're going to eventually get fast on our one training day per month. Speed has to be intentional. It has to be built in intentionally and deliberately, and you have to work on it, and you have to go fast, and you have to learn to go fast if you want to win. That's it. If you want to win. If you're just out plinking, whatever, go out and plink. But if you want to learn to shoot faster and more accurately, then you have to train it. You have to train it. In the competition world, you're never going to win if you're not fast. In the law enforcement or military world, there's a potential for you to lose it all. And furthermore, not just lose it all for you, but then endanger your team or your partner. So think about that. Speed's not this extra thing that comes along if you think you're a hot rod. No. Speed is still a thing that needs to be built in. It needs to exist. It has to exist for you to be better. Ask any competitor. And that speed matters. Now, there's plenty of shooting matches out there that they may favor accuracy over speed, right? They may favor the gun piece over the shooting piece, and they may favor points over time. Whatever, man. IDPA is kind of it's a slower moving sport than USPSA, but it's still by no means slow. And it depends on where you're shooting at and who you're shooting against. But in every competition I've ever shot at, there are highly competitive humans out there who do not want to lose. So you have to go fast if you aim to be competitive. And if you're out there just doing it for fun, okay, great. But it should be fun to see yourself improve and get faster. Speed is not something that we have time to eventually catch up with. We have to train it intentionally. And then obviously the question I ask every class and every private session and everyone I train is, what's more important, speed or accuracy? It's a trick question, right? They're both equally important. One's not more important than the other. If you and I are standing 5 yards apart and I do a .85 draw and put rounds all over your torso before you've ever even squeezed one perfect round off, then speed mattered more. Likewise, if I pull my gun in .85 seconds and blaze up and miss every single shot, and you take your time and get the 2 perfect rounds on my heart, right? Accuracy mattered, right? So you have no possible way of knowing how that's going to shake out. So you have to train both. And in my blog, I talked about training up close, 3 and 5 yards. I advocate that only because that's where you learn to go fast. You have to train your body to move faster than you're used to. You can't just depend on incrementally. Hopefully I drew a little faster this time than I did last time. Go up close and where you're controlled and you still get feedback, and go as fast as you can safely go. Push the limits up close. Now, don't do that day after day after day, right? Also, you need to be shooting at 25, 30, 35 yards and beyond. How fast can you draw your pistol and put 4 rounds on target at 25 yards? I know plenty of people that can't put 4 rounds on a target at 25 yards. So still, there's that balance. Obviously, it's going to be slower than your bill drill, your bill minus drill up at 7 yards. But there's guys out there that can get pretty close to that. Yeah, the target's smaller, so the deviations matter more. And that's where we learn out at distance is where we learn that the little things we noticed up close, they have a much bigger impact out at distance, right? So if you are somehow manipulating your gun when you pull the trigger, say down and left, like many people do, that's going to be a big problem out at 25. And so all that does is help you identify that and gives you an opportunity to tune that up. So shooting perfect is awesome, but imperfect shooting allows us to see where we have weaknesses. As long as they're consistent, right? Patterns. If we're all over the place all the time and there's just no consistent data, that's unusual. And that I don't see that happen a lot, but you got to be able to establish patterns to be able to establish corrections for those. But out at distance is a good place to do it. As a civilian, the chances of you ever shooting your gun at 35 yards are slim to zero in a real situation. Absolutely, but there's always anomalies, right? You guys remember that guy up north somewhere, Minnesota or somewhere? He was in the mall and did, what was it, 40 yards shy. He shot 10 rounds, 8 rounds on target at something like 30 or 40 yards. That was a good piece of work there, but my immediate question was, where are the other 2 rounds at? Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but I'm sure maybe he had a good backstop. Maybe, he felt comfortable taking those shots, or maybe he was just divinely guided. I don't know. That's rare, though. That's an anomaly for sure. Now, maybe for cops, sometimes they're more likely to get into that distance, because most videos I see, cops immediately turn and run away. So they try to put distance. I guess that's mostly their SOP is to try to get away and then somehow take these difficult shots under stress at distance that they can't even do on their qualifications at 20 yards or 25 yards. I don't poo-poo the cops. I love the cops. I got a love-hate relationship with the cops. And it's mainly because of the training mentality. At any rate, train to go fast, people. There's nothing wrong with it. What's wrong with it if you just blaze up, you get no data from it, and you just continually do the same thing over and over, and you're not performing well? Eventually, all right, it's about the way you perform, not necessarily the outcome. However, eventually, now we're praying for eventually, right? If you're not putting rounds in acceptable spots, your accuracy is not going to eventually be there either. So you have to put it all together so that you're putting the fast rounds on the A zone. The fast rounds on the A zone at whatever distance. So anyway, there's different ways to score. There's different ways to measure when you're out shooting. So it's not always, did I get the A zone hit? Sometimes we might care more about time. Sometimes that's what we're working on, trying to push time. A lot of times with my clients, when we do private sessions or whatnot, if they have any experience at all, the first thing we'll do is go do a timed or cold shot at 7 yards from the draw. Just one round. How fast can we put one round in the A zone at 7 yards? Clearly the goal is 1 second. And if we can't do that cold, well, that's something to train for. But that's one of the things I do, just to get the beep going early, to get the mindset correct, to let's get ready to go fast. So there are my thoughts, folks, on pistol training. And this translates to rifle as well. There are my thoughts on pistol training. Go fast. There's nothing wrong with going fast. If you think if you think it's somehow dangerous or counterproductive, reach out to me. If you're an old NRA guy and you wear your red shirt everywhere and your red hat and you think everything I'm saying is bullcrap, please, hit me up. I'm happy to talk about methodology, and I'm happy to go out and train with whoever to solidify my point of view. If you're a USCCA trainer, which I am, and you're an NRA trainer, which I am, and you're not stepping out of their curriculum and you're only doing what their curriculum has to offer, you're shortchanging your students. I'm just saying that outright. You're shortchanging your students if you're training NRA or USCCA curriculum. USCCA is a little bit better when it comes to, I don't know, they kind of delve into like different sort of tactics for home defense and church defense and things. But when it comes to shooting the gun, they're still a little old paradigm. Perfect front sight picture, breathe, trigger squeeze and all that stuff. So if you're not breaking outside of those curriculum, then you're doing your students a disservice. And if you can't train beyond their standards, specifically NRA and USCCA, then you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not performing beyond their standards. And then there's all the RSO class out there, the old boys who are lifetime RSOs, and then you get out there with your own little quirky things that you say are dangerous that aren't, or quirky things that you allow to pass that shouldn't. I know I've seen the various kinds of guys out on the range, and some of them are just unpleasant people to be around, or they're poopy, or they're in charge. So when they're in charge, they want to be large and in charge. That's not everyone. I'm just saying there's a lot of those guys out there too, right? There's the NRA class of sort of FUDs that, heaven forbid, you shoot faster than 1 round per second. Then there's the RSO class out, and especially IDPA, that if your toe was within 1/8 of an inch of touching the ground on the other side of the fault line, you're disqualified. or they shoot, when they shoot the stage, they're consistently 12 or 15 out of 20. They never change the way they shoot, but they know every rule in the book. You know what I'm saying? So beware of those guys as well. If you want to learn to shoot fast, there's guys, local guys. You can come out to Osprey Shooting Solutions. There's another fella out there who is a pro shooter, grandmaster, Deshaun Jenkins, who, if you're not following that guy, you should be. He is a blazer, man. He shoots fast and he shoots well and he wins. He wins. So Deshaun Jenkins is another good guy to follow. I don't know his @ right now. Well, I'm going to look it up while we're still on here. And then, of course, our partner and buddy, Kurt Fennell, who is KFactor85 on Instagram. He is a tactical games. He is a tactical games champion, an elite division. And that's his primary goal in life, is to smoke down the tactical games. So KFactor85 on Instagram. And then let's see what Deshaun, DGenks, DGENKS 412 on Instagram. That's Deshaun. And oddly, both of these guys shoot for Lago, and they both shoot aliens. Deshaun, I think, shoots a lot of different guns. He shoots some CZs and various guns. Kurt right now shoots the Lago alien, and I think Atlas. At any rate, if you want to learn to go fast, follow these guys. If you need to train to go fast, come out here and train, or go out to Jenkins and train. And also my buddy Force Solutions, and that's Dennis Rousseau. He's come around in the competition world. He's been training hard over the last, I think, 2 years maybe. He's been training very hard in the competition world. So check him out as well. Next Saturday, we have the OSS Challenge. Now, right now, I think we have an even number of people because it's a 2-man team event. But if you and a homie want to sign up, we still have space for you and a homie to sign up. And now you can sign up for that at ospreyshootingsolutions.com. And that is in support of the Special Forces Foundation. We have April 12th and 13th, we have a practical pistol day course and then a dynamic pistol course. You can take both of those for a discount, or you can take each separately, or one separately. I highly encourage, I think I'm going to try this format out for a while to have them back to back on a Saturday and Sunday. That way you get all the goodness for practical pistol, and then you go in fresh and hot for dynamic pistol. That's how I'm going to run my rifle next month, and then that's the way we're going to do it for a while until I get some feedback otherwise. So those are coming up mid-April, 12 and 13, I do believe. So OspreyShootingSolutions.com on those as well. And then we have a land nav course coming up May, I want to say 4, 5, and 6, possibly. It's 3 days. It's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, first weekend in May. And that's a 3-day land navigation course. That's 1 day in the classroom. And then that's an overnighter out in the Talladega National Forest. It's going to be very challenging, eminently challenging. Even if you think you're a pretty salty navigator, this is going to challenge you. I set this course up kind of framed after the STAR course in selection. So there's long movements between each point, and we're going to have point sitters out for each of those. So get into that. That's a good one. There's still we could probably accommodate 2 or 3 more folks for that. And anyway, as always, reach out. Edgar Mills at OspreyShootingSolutions.com. If you have any suggestions or questions, or you just want to debate a topic. And then finally, on the JuntoPodcast.com website, if you want to write a blog, if you want to write a paper, a well-written paper on anything from philosophy to politics to firearms training, if it's well-written, we'll look over it and post it. I'm not going to post a lot of inflammatory stuff, and if it's written at a 5th grade level, I'm not going to post it. However, use Microsoft Office to tune up to edit. All right. And we'll post your thoughts as well. And then, as always, thanks for listening, folks. I love you guys. I'm glad you're out there listening. Thanks for hitting 3,000 downloads. I look forward to getting bigger as far as the podcast goes. And I look forward to seeing you guys out here training in whatever capacity. Reach out. Take care. Be safe. Treat each other well.